Okay, so I think we can all agree that keeping up with AI is basically a job in itself these days, but we're going to try to make it a little easier for you today. We're diving into Anthropic's new Claude 3.7 Sonnet model. It just came out February 24th, 2025. And if you're anything like us, you're an AI practitioner, and you need to know what this means for your work.
Right.
So the big news is that this Claude 3.7 Sonnet is being called the first, hybrid AI reasoning model. Supposedly, this means we get the best of both worlds, the quick answers we need, and the ability for it to really think deeply when we need that. But, how does that actually work for developers?
Yeah, so let's maybe start with defining what a reasoning model actually is in this context. It's not exactly human thought, but it's kind of like AI breaking a problem down into steps, almost like a flowchart. And it seems like it leads to more accurate results. And this is kind of a trend we're seeing across the board with models like Google's Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking and xAI's Grok 3.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And another thing I noticed is that Anthropic is also really pushing the idea of making things simpler for users. They're going with this whole one-model-fits-all approach, so we don't have to deal with choosing between all these different models. I feel like that's another trend a lot of AI labs are going for. What do you think this means for developers who are actually using these tools?
Well, I think simplifying things is always a good thing, right? It just makes everything easier and faster. So less time picking models means developers can develop things quicker and more cost effectively. It also just reduces that mental overload so they can actually focus on what matters, building and innovating.
For sure. But here's where I think it gets really cool. Claude 3.7 Sonnet has this visible scratch pad, and that means it shows its thought process while it's working. What does that even mean for developers, and does it actually help us figure out how the model thinks?
I know it sounds kind of wild, right? Being able to see how the model thinks, but it's a huge leap forward for transparency in AI. I think for developers, it means they can trust the model more, it's easier to find errors, and it provides a ton of data for researchers working on alignment. But there is kind of a catch, what we call the faithfulness problem, meaning what we see on that scratch pad might not be everything that's happening inside the model. Kind of like a debugger that shows you the code execution, but not how the compiler optimizes it. It's insight, but not the whole picture.
That's a good analogy. I see what you mean. And there has been some talk about the safety of all this with the thought process being visible, especially when it comes to harmful content. So I think Anthropic is using encryption for that, right?
Exactly. They know it could be a risk to show everything, so they're encrypting those sensitive parts of the thinking process to make sure nothing harmful or private gets out. It's like finding that balance between transparency and being responsible.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so changing gears a bit, Anthropic is also rolling out this new coding tool called Claude Code. And it lets developers work directly with Claude right from their terminal, which to me sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool idea.
Think about it. You could analyze a whole project structure just by typing. Explain this project structure. It seems like Claude Code could really change how we work with code modification, error testing, and even GitHub integration.
Yeah, definitely. It could really streamline things. It's almost like having an AI partner coding with you right there in the terminal, helping you figure things out, find mistakes, and even write new code snippets. The only downside right now is that it's just a research preview, so not everyone can use it yet.
Ah, that makes sense.
Okay.
So let's talk money. How does the cost of this Claude 3.7 Sonnet stack up against other models? What about OpenAI's O3 Mini and DeepSeek's R1?
So cost is always a big factor, and Claude 3.7 Sonnet comes in at $3 per million input tokens and $15 per million output tokens, which might sound like a bit more than O3 Mini or DeepSeek's R1. But remember, Claude 3.7 Sonnet is this hybrid model, so it can do the quick answers and the deep thinking, whereas those others are mainly focused on the reasoning. So you're getting more bang for your buck with Claude 3.7 Sonnet.
Right. It's about what you need. So how does it actually perform compared to those models? I know the sources we looked at mentioned some benchmarks like the SWE bench for coding and the TAU bench for user and API interactions.
Yeah, the results are really interesting. On SW Bench, which measures how well it codes in real-world situations, Claude 3.7 Sonnet scored a 62.3% accuracy, which actually beats OpenAI's O3 Mini, which got 49.3%. And then on TAU Bench, which is all about how well it works with users and APIs, Claude 3.7 Sonnet got 81.2%, while OpenAI's O1 model only got 73.5%. So it seems like it's significantly better at handling complex code and working with external systems.
Okay, that's impressive. Another thing that's always evolving in AI is safety, especially when it comes to those times when the model just refuses to answer a question. It sounds like Claude 3.7 Sonnet has made some progress there.
Absolutely. Anthropic has really been working on their safety features. They're saying it has 45% fewer unnecessary refusals compared to the last version, Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And that's a big deal for both users and how useful the model actually is. Other labs are still trying to find that sweet spot between safety and responsiveness, but it looks like Anthropic is ahead of the curve.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of the basics of Claude 3.7 Sonnet.
We have. So we've covered a lot of the basics of Claude 3.7 Sonnet.
We have.
But let's dig a little deeper into how this hybrid approach actually works.
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Like, what's going on under the hood to make it think for longer periods?
Well, Anthropic says that it combines the speed of a regular language model with the depth of a reasoning model.
Okay.
So basically, Claude 3.7 Sonnet can switch gears depending on how hard the task is.
It's like smart switching.
Yeah, exactly. For simple things, it gives quick answers.
Right.
But when it encounters a more complex problem, it activates its reasoning mode,
Okay.
breaks the problem down into steps, and takes more time to analyze it.
So it's not just thinking longer, it's thinking smarter.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that we can see this thinking process in action with the visible scratch pad.
Yeah.
Is that available for everything we ask it to do?
It sounds like Anthropic is planning to make the visible scratch pad accessible for most prompts.
Okay.
But they've also been very clear about the importance of safety and security.
Right.
So there will be times when parts of that thinking process are hidden or encrypted, especially if it involves sensitive information or potentially harmful content.
That makes sense. Transparency is important, but so is responsible AI development.
Exactly.
Now, this Claude code, the new coding tool, sounds like it could really change the game.
It does have a lot of potential.
But it's still in research preview, right?
It-
What are the limitations we should be aware of? And what might the future hold for this tool?
You're right. Claude Code is still in a limited release through a waitlist.
Okay.
Anthropic seems to be taking a cautious approach, gathering feedback and making improvements before they release it more broadly.
Makes sense.
As for the future, it's exciting to think about the possibilities. We could see even better code generation accuracy support for more programming languages and even deeper integration with existing developer tools.
Wow.
Imagine being able to describe an entire application in plain English.
And it just does it. And having Claude Code generate the code for you. That's the kind of potential this tool has.
That's incredible. I'm starting to see how Claude 3.7 Sonnet and Claude Code could be a really powerful combination for developers.
Definitely.
But with all this talk about AI thinking and reasoning, how do we make sure it aligns with human values and doesn't pose risks?
That's a critical point.
Yeah.
The ethical implications become more significant as AI models get more advanced.
Anthropic has been vocal about their commitment to developing safe and responsible AI.
Huh?
They're using approaches like constitutional AI to align AI behavior with human principles.
Okay.
And they're actively researching and developing new methods to mitigate potential risks, like misuse or unintended consequences.
It's good to know they're focused on those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, before we move on, I want to touch on the concept of reasoning in AI one more time.
Yeah.
It's a term that gets used a lot, but what does it really mean for us as developers and scientists?
In AI, reasoning means the model can process information logically
Okay.
and draw conclusions based on evidence.
So it's evidence-based.
It's about going beyond pattern recognition to understand the relationships between ideas.
Okay.
For developers, this translates to AI systems that can solve more complex problems, provide deeper insights, and ultimately make better decisions.
So it's not just about building systems that repeat what they've been told or follow rules. It's about building systems that can actually think for themselves.
Exactly. And that's what makes this field so exciting.
I agree.
We're at the beginning of a new era in AI where machines can enhance human intelligence in ways we couldn't have imagined before.
Yeah, that's really cool.